Welcome to the second webinar, Allergies and Intolerances from the perspective of bioresonance, according to Paul Schmidt. Thank you very much. It's great to have you here. We got questions from the first webinar, but this was a very good feedback, so I think we're on the right track. And what we'd like to look at more precisely today is the view of bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt regarding allergies and intolerances. And again, this reminder must not be missed that these informations, advice, and solutions come from almost 40 years' experience, yet they don't replace the visit to the therapist or doctor. And in spite of great studies, up to a clinical perspective, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study, the classic conventional medicine does not accept nor recognize our bioresonance. Again, the reminder of repetitions, you can have a look again at these webinars. If you are not able to take part in all four, it's good if you can repeat them. This can be done in the RAH wiki or in our YouTube channel. How do you do that? Very simple. You open the browser, search RAH on YouTube in the playlist, and can have a look at the webinar. If you want to have a look at the wiki and you don't have the username and password, please request it on the info@ryanx.de. So we are now in the overview of our webinars. It's important to see the dates again, and we're on the 23rd of February, then the 2nd of March we'll have a webinar, and the 9th of March the last one. But today, coming back, we want to have a look from the perspective of bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt. What do we understand under allergies and intolerances? Well, the webinar, I hope, will explain more in detail what is it. I think most of you have dealt with it. You'll probably know as we learned in the first webinar what it is about, but what we want to elaborate today is what do our devices, what does that mean, and what sort of test is it? Because you know it's not a test where you take blood or so, but we work energetically. This is one part, and I hope that Mr. Heimers will tell us more details. The second part is that I would like to show you how to create a therapy program so what you have tested can be implemented in a therapy program for a good treatment. Right, so coming back to the first webinar, I stated once and again that it's absolutely great to have practical examples from, and as you said, we don't take blood. It's a non-invasive procedure which makes it painless in application. So this allows us precisely to support and treat allergies and intolerances. Well, you said to have a better idea of the subject of intolerances and allergies. Let's go one step back and let's look at it retrospectively. Well, I would like to advance that all these observations are in the green paper on bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt. I think that it's more than 500 pages strong, more than 30,000 copies have been distributed among users, so it's very good to read. And if we look back in the past, you see here Paul Schmidt in the picture, because in 1975 he started finding out why frequencies have an effect on the organism. And this was the great time of bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt, even though the modern use, we say modern bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt, is different, but it's an evolution of what was researched at that time. But that's what happens if we want to make progress. We need to research and develop. There's no way around it. And what is decisive in understanding intolerances and allergies, how our perception of substances is from an energetical point of view. That is, how do we understand the molecular structure which is incompatible with the body, with vis-a-vis which the body reacts with an allergy or an intolerant reaction when getting in contact with it. What happens? How can we explain it? And you know that on behalf of the bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt, every matter is defined as a frequency. It's very well shown in quantum physics, and in the last 40 years, also in quantum mechanics, has settled strongly. Many Nobel Prizes are awarded in this area, and it shows that our approach is within the approach of future medicine. If we're looking back today and look at how medicine looked like 100 years ago, they start smiling because they see, well, how brutal it was, what they did, and how little ideas or knowledge they had. And I can promise you that within 100 years, therapists and physicians will laugh at what we are doing today and how we proceed, because for sure the way also in energetic medicine has been set, because everything we see in research can be applied, adapted to bioresonance therapy. And this also explains how and why, with bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt, in dealing with allergies and intolerances, we can be successful. The fact that each substance is broken down. Let's take a molecular compound, an allergic substance. What does that mean? What is it? Let's break it down. That substance is, of course, a molecular compound. If we get more into detail out of this compound, we have an atomic structure. Atoms are made again of much smaller parts of protons, neutrons, electrons, and so on. And in the end, you ask, if we get further down, what is this made of? And here you get further down to the outcome that, for instance, a substance is a corpuscle or energetic information, that is energy. So with waves. This is the state of current research, and it's very interesting. If we think of it, a substance first, of course, is visible to the eye, then it's broken further down, and in the end we state that it's a frequency structure behind which describes each of these molecules. And if we take it down to the organism, it turns out that we are made of these molecules, atoms, and these minimal parts down to the quarks or the particles with wave character. And this makes clear that in the end, with bioresonance, we make repairs, which means that with these frequencies, we can stimulate the organism according to the resonance principle, and we can set regulations. And this is almost 40 years since in 45 countries around the world and with big success. Studies not only have demonstrated this approach in vitro but also in vivo with this gold standard study that has been published in the German Register of Clinical Studies. So let's come closer to intolerances and substances. You know that, and here we need to enter a new subject in order to be able, with the bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt, to create a tolerable situation for the body so we can tolerate a substance. And all this is based on what Paul Schmidt stated in 1975, that each matter not only is a frequency, but it also has a so-called spin, a so-called direction of rotation. This has been demonstrated in quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and there is also according literature. It's very important. If you look at the frequency, it usually has a sinus shape, but if it has a spin, it means that this has a shape of sinus, but then it has a rotation also. And as our universe is made, all what involves a rotation is very stable. But our Earth can stabilize because the moon is rotating around it and stabilizes its axis, which means that rotation means stability. And this can, taken from the big whole of a universe, break it down to the smallest within our organism, down to regulation procedures. And if we have a substance that has a certain frequency and a certain spin, and we take it to the body, and the body regulatorily is already at the limit of acceptance, and we add to it the substance and the spin from an energetic point of view, it comes to an intolerable situation, and we can regulate it by taking the contrary spin, so rotating to the right is in the plus too much, and it basically we regulate it through a left rotating spin with the according same frequency, thus entering a regulation. And this is exactly what occurs in the system of bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt, and we do it with a so-called polarizer that is an absolutely simple to explain. It's a system. We talk of a solenoid in the bioresonant devices according to Paul Schmidt. There are two. It's a whole spool. The frequencies are led through this hollow spool at a very weak direct current, which allows to give a spin to these frequencies. So with two solenoids we can send left and right rotating spins, and by adding both solenoids we can connect and activate both at the same time. So we have a bipolar approach, so the left and right rotating spin at the same time in the frequencies. And then you can see, and therefore the bipolar function is the most important we have, because at the beginning it was rather with plus and minus in research, precisely with the development of Mr. Latterer, we would like to mention on this occasion. And we saw that with this bipolar function, the body came back into the regulation, which means that if we have a substance, then we add it into the measuring or protective cup, and through the transfer values, it can be applied to the body. So through the molecular structure in the device, we have the right frequency, and through the bipolar antenna system and the transfer values, it is transferred. These frequencies having a very good approach to the organism, by the way, developed in Austria many, many years ago. I think it's 25 years since. So these frequencies go through the solenoids and then to the body. So they have the wave frequency, we have the bipolar function, and we are able, when the organism has an excessive reaction in any case, we can work with a counter-rotating direction. We stabilize it and apply it to the medicine. It comes to desensitization and therefore to a toleration of this substance. So almost an acceptance. It's accepted. Very theoretical. And as you mentioned, it's great with a polarizer. It's nice to have it explained. Believe me that it seems very normal that we've interpreted the polarizer. I start with an external one. You have to imagine that you have the polarizer to the left, the right, the tensor, and in the middle, the RAH-Com device. It was not easy at all. And our original mentor said, forget about plus minus, nothing can go wrong. So that was my beginning with external polarizer. And he was right, by the way. It turned out to be true. Yeah, it was integrated. Yeah, that's true. It was used to be external. Yes, but that's development. But it shows, of course, a nice story from the retrospective, how long we've been dealing with the subject. The treatment of intolerances and allergies is at RAH Biomedical for endless time, and there is a lot of expertise, and it's nice that we can integrate it into a webinar. Okay, we go a step further from the theoretical perspective to the practical application. Yes, let's go into tests. And as I said, we have integrated the polarizer, so you don't need to bother with it. It's very easy. It's important that you actually use it. And as we said before, when you test, and in testing the polarizer is turned off at N, it's important. And I have a rotation in case that there is no energetic issue, but if the rotation becomes a line, it clearly shows that allergens are weakening the body energetics, so that I found an incompatibility. Everything runs on N without polarizer. That's the test. Right, now comes the question. I think you all have an idea. If we test intolerances, we don't test one or two things. Usually it's a whole set of things you go through, and it's very important that you can make a difference if I have a strong or a weak issue, because we'll agree that we first tackle the strong problems, because some things solved by themselves. There are main allergens, and if they are blocked energetically, if I can equalize this, the rest is much easier. And to find out whether you have a strong or weak problem, you need a stabilizer. And on N, it would be turned off. I test here, I have a linear movement, because then I have to harmonize something, and then comes the polarizer. I would switch it directly in the device or through the RAH tensor, and you can switch it to bipolar. You see on the next picture the possibilities. N is on the left, and comes bipolar, and with plus and then minus. If we switch to bipolar, Please remember, if we were with a RH, it can't work with bipolar only because in RH it don't make difference between plus and minus, only BMS. So let's change to bipolar plus minus, and if you still have a linear and a Rayet tensor, then it's the idea of a strong disturbance, and I would note that because, as I said, first we set the focus in harmonizing on the strong issue. Right. So what about desensitization? What does that mean exactly? What does it mean in the system? Desensitization always occurs what has been determined what substance is weakening the body energetics. So when you test it, what substance from the tests or earlier has been tested, or from the allergen as such, or from tests, self-made tests, whatever, then you have determined what substance is not tolerated. And the desensitization is quite easy by taking the polarizer, switching it to bipolar, plus minus, and the body has the frequency transferred from the substance, and both rotating directions and spins are conveyed. The body always reacts by equalizing, and this is in the end the desensitization of an non-tolerated substance through bioresonance according to Paul Schmidt. And in the end, for how long do we desensitize? It's very easy. By testing if in the meantime you switch back from bipolar to N, you check again whether there's still the linear effect, you then see again, switch back to bipolar, and go on harmonizing. What is the recommended time? Well, if we start with RH, we'll come back later on, but we have different programs and they have the allergens, and we have had a good experience that if you work with 5 minutes, which is quite a long time, many say, well, only 5 minutes, but we work with RAH, it's different from BMPS, so it's faster and more effective. We combine everything, and at the end of the webinar, or as we make progress, I'll show you precisely what we can do, how we can structure such a program, but we have had good experiences, and with allergens, by and by, with these 5 minutes, you can make progress. And we need to say that we are in a complete system change, because over many years, we have offered the file approaches up to 1,000 different substances, but it also meant 1,000 different recipients that had to be stored. And as it's the sign of the times that it's increasingly difficult to get substances that are not charged, because what helps testing pollen that's full of pesticides? It's not a true test. I know whether I'm testing pesticides or pollen. And due to this, for the moment, we have two systems we can use. We can use files up to now, but we've seen that with the new RAH modules, the new RAH-Globaltest in the human area and also in the veterinary area, the testings can be done with according RAH programs in both PS10 and bipolar. This is the thing, and this was a hell of a work. I really am very, very grateful It was a very long testing work that was necessary because you need to think that each single substance, in order to make it available in RAH, had to be tested as to its frequency basic values. You don't do it only once, but very often. Then you have it rest for some days, you test again, you create, you do the interfaces, and per substance you quickly have 400 to 500 tests. And take that times roughly 700 tests. It's 350,000 testings that had to be done in order to have the native substances transferred to the RAH world. And this is what we've done, especially in the last 2 years, which allowed us also, while presenting the RAOScan, the global test modules. So, again, why did we do it? The reason is that the RAH programs are very user-friendly. Just think, imagine that you are not only in practice, but also perhaps in veterinary application, then it's difficult to take these test sets with you. Of course, it's not very handy. So if you have RAH programs that describe all these substances, then it's integrated in the device and you take it with you. And this is very user-friendly. And we can do it in the Rayocom Polar 4.0 or PS10, both human and vet. We had many questions how I can protect my test kit from heat, rays, dirt. There were very, very big wrappings, and we wanted to had money invested. It wasn't very easy for those who were mobile. So to have a global test set and to wrap it so it is not damaged, it was difficult, and now it's much better. And the interest was really big, and therefore it's great that all the work that is behind the development has been honored by having users using the system. But it's not only storage, the test files, as I said, glass files and glass and breaking, it goes together. And it occurred once and again that we had questions, do we have individual test files because I was broke, if we can replace it. This was, well, it's never a nice process we're having because, of course, imagine that you have a file with mercury. If it falls on the ground, well, it's not especially great, so to say. So, if everything is implemented in an RAH program, it's much more sure and it comes more in handy. Another point we must not forget, when we have really good test sets, they are native and they are the original substance, and yet due to light or UV rays and also oxidation, drying or even fungi, these files can also be damaged, and this is not especially good for the testing process because in the end you don't know whether the test is accurate. If we have an RAH program, it's defined, it's settled. An RAH program cannot oxidate, it cannot have fungi, and it cannot age because the test sets usually are have been made for a useful life for 5 years, and This in an RAH is not the case anymore. So customers who bought a Raycom PS10 in 2008 will use an RAH today like then in 2008. So you don't have any aging there. And then comes another decisive point you must not forget. Test sets need the native substances also need the conserving substances. So you had also the vials with their conservants, and you had to desensitize them. Otherwise, you don't know whether you are testing the pollen or the conservant. So you need to have an exclusion test. It was done greatly over the years, but now with the RAH global tests we offer, it's not the case anymore because we only looked into the substance without preservatives nor any substance maintaining the properties. So we have very pure substances that can be given into the RAH. And we only can tell you that we are more than happy to have finished this development progress in both the human and veterinary area because, as we said, it was an incredible amount of testing required. So let's come to the content. I think it really was worth it. I just like to show you the overall groups. It's too much to list them all, but we all agree if we talk of food, we need the aromas and the colorants, the antioxidants. But when testing food, looking at the cross allergens, we also need pollen, we need animal epithelia, we need plant fibers. Then we have household and cosmetic products, synthetic fibers, pesticides, photoprotective substances. You'll always be confronted with them when you go on holidays. Our system is very useful because there are so many possible substances, and unfortunately, the most expensive are not always the best. It's where they are tolerated. What's important? Precisely what about small children? Think of them. If you go south, a small child uh, gets a sun protector from tip to top every day, and if it's not well tolerated, it's no wonder that the child is crying, has fever in the evening. It's not the sun, it's the sun protector. So there are many possibilities in these tests. Yeah, and something practical about PS10. Yes, as we said, there are both. We have the small and the big device in Raycom PS10 and Polo, and the possibility of testing it. It's very easy to use it. So you need an M10 and an M5 in combination. Then you are optimally equipped. With the mode button, you can go to the RAH test. Then you have the analysis preparation. Set it always on test because it's a prerequisite. So the RAH can test without no problems because the transfer frequency is somehow blocked. Then they need to be harmonized first. So this is always the step you need to think of. But then you can start from 1100, which is food. It's the introduction to the module, and as we said, you can check whether you have a strong weak disorder. Precisely in PS10, you have documentation created so you can check everything what could be a problem because you need to sort it and have the idea of what is worked through, how do I proceed with harmonization, and then we can recommend that you harmonize together up to 10 energetically disturbed programs. If you do more than that, take them by groups. For instance, food with food, pollen with pollen. Well, documentation, PS10, that's an important subject. We are still within the Raycom PS10. PS10 not has the possibility of printing or generating a PDF. In Polar 4.0, this is possible, but for PS10, what we thought is that we offer specific download. You can see here the link, and there you have blank documentation on the global test, which you can download. And when you test through, you can check what intolerances do exist. This is the basic idea behind this download. Of course, we could remind of the structure of the RAH and the overall groups. Mrs. Blankenburg said that we have great main groups, and there you have the details from gross to fine. Also in the global test, we can use them very nicely. This accelerates testing because if you see that you have a reaction and no reaction in metals, you can skip it, all underlying RAH programs. And this, of course, can be checked in documentation and accordingly documented and making a desensitization. Well, in Polar 4.0, it's a bit more comfortable because it's easier to see. You can see what you are selecting, you can read it, you can go directly to the test, you can also numerically, alphabetically. So here we also recommend that you discriminate strong and weak disorders. You can also save the client history. And as with RAH-Comp, we see the main possibilities. Main group test, they can check it. When there is a disturbance, you can go into detail, but you don't have to. You can, and here we have to think back with like the files. You can harmonize with an overall group, just for you for information. Yes, and Polar 4.0 offers different possibilities, not only printing the documentation. We have the client history, but also a PDF document. In PS10, if when you went through the test protocol, you can scan it and you have it on the computer where you can store it. This is something you usually do now, but if you have a 4.0 with our USB stick, it's very easy. Please, it only works with the Rynex USB. Yes, but it's also um, it's only provided. Okay, so let's see a practical use. I said before, I would like to show you how this program can be structured. We always need to work with energetics, that is analysis preparation, then vitalization, and then you can start with the RAH programs. With these orders, you can introduce them. The basic detoxification is also recommended, and the final vitalization. Sometimes you ask why we say it. It's because what is what has proved best, especially this configuration. I was really great. Dr. Breyer, in the first study, in the first programs, he started with energetization and detoxification. That was the first step to show that it works, and we have tried so many things. It's our recommendation. We said before, it's an open system. It's under constant development. If we found out that something is even better, then of course we would tell you and would add to it. But for the time being, that's what's working best. You said it's added to, and here I would like to come back to it because it was the usual at Rynex that developments are also made available for free in the software update. So those who acquired an RAH module 10 years ago for PS10, for instance, Through the updates, they'll get all the RAH program for free that have been developed later. The M5 module is a special module. It's a module of its own. It's not part of the M9, but all the further developments, even if we now develop the M5 model and you acquired it previously, the updates are for free. And we think that's absolutely fair and extremely future-minded. Why did we do so? We always said that we want that users who went for one system always have the best possible equipment as to a therapeutic patient. Therefore, updates both in the past and the future have been and will be for free. It's valid for both the PS10 and the Polar. So let's come back to practical use. Again, more than 10 energetically disturbed programs. We would recommend to go by groups, so doing different therapies, just dividing the programs, first food, and then, for instance, pollen, that you divide it, but only from 10. The experience showed that up to 10 you can mix them, that's no problem. But we came to things what has proven to be fine. The own secretion, for instance, a handkerchief with nasal secretion, you can put them in the protective cup. Why? Because in this secretion there are frequency spectra, and they have perhaps things that is not in the RAH, and all they can be taken into account in harmonization and desensitization and make tolerable for the organism, and it's easier for the organism to do it right. But I want to mention ryotabs. So check first whether ryotabs are compatible. This is the main prerequisite for using them. But then the can be placed in the measuring cup, and you transfer the spectrums to the tabs, and our recommendation is 3 times 3 daily. You mentioned cross allergies, and I think this is to be observed. Yes, I think that cross allergies, at the first webinar from Mr. Schipper, we had an idea. She mentioned it. What is it? And it's very interesting, I think, that protein compounds, both in pollen and in food, there are protein compounds that are identical. You can have a look at these structures and they look the same. There are areas that are absolutely identical. So what happens? On contact with pollen or food, we get problems, intolerances, allergic reactions. And I think that's very exciting, and you need to bear in mind, if we look at the table, I think it was very interesting that, for instance, if you have problem with birch pollen, that you have problems with kiwis and banana. It sounds weird, but if you go out and you have the birch, it's incredible that they come home and eat a banana, which seems, well, to have no allergies. But if you have problems with the birch, it could be that it's the banana. Another example that was impressive to me is with grass. If you have this grass allergy, rather in July and summer, and it's possible that precisely if you eat a melon or rice or similar things, that you have allergic problems, and it has to do with each other. And these are things we should take into account when testing. But it's easy to explain, because what does that mean energetically? It means that they have the same spectrum. And you find this again, and we found it in detecting all frequency converters and stating the allergens and intolerances of substances. In how far is this taken into account in practice? Oh, that's something for the questions. Definitely. To me, it's important that you see these relations, because you can find them out very easily For instance, if I have a problem with grass, it's not that pomacious fruit, stone fruit, kiwi, celery, a tomato. It's not that you are intolerant with all this, not to have you scared, but you can definitely find out what can it be and how strong it is. Well, and as I said, we looked more into it, and if your so-called allergy ace, you know it very well. It's not new to you that if I say that there are main allergens and main primary allergens cause 90% of all food allergies. And these primary allergens have to be visible. For instance, on menu cards, I think you saw it. Even if you are at the fish and chip shop, you see um, the stars and numbers, and you look down and see what it is. So it's these primary allergens, and it makes sense that we definitely test them in the therapy and in harmonization and desensitization that we go for them because if we can jump to a certain tolerance there, many other problems are reduced. So we thought it would be useful if we give you this hint for this RAH and we allocate the primary allergens to the main programs. As you can see here, you have the possibility, for instance, chicken egg and dairy milk, RAH 1110. They are included there. So chicken egg, dairy milk, peanut, and so on. These are the main allergens we can offer to you, and it's clear that it's a test of its own. So I can recommend you to go through the primary allergens, and if you want to test them, you need to make it more comfortable, not taking out everything. And for this, we have the green card, and on the green card, you can store it optimally, and you have a quick test of the primary allergens. You have everything on one SIM card. Yes, and then still with a fish and chip shop. You got hungry? Well, it's a bit late, yeah, but I was just thinking why you not only have the allergens but the RAH numbers. Well, then we got far, yeah, definitely. Okay, but in any case, also the primary allergens, as I said, in the quick test, it could be interesting. Definitely, we can see them again. I think I make like to make things simple, and you can store it in the Polar. But such a green card, it's fast to develop, and I put the primary allergens there, and that would be a nice option to start with a quick test, and then you get much information from the onset. Right. Okay. Perhaps just a small outlook, because we did the previous job by having all substances um, captured as to frequencies and taken to the RAH in the M5 module, human area in PS10, and M6 in the veterinary area, and in the polar, the according RAH global test for human and vet. And this almost requires and calls for integration into an automatic RAOScan test, so you create possibilities here without the RAO tensor work to have the results of a very exhaustive allergen and intolerance test. Yes, that's definitely the future, and it will be fun. We'll have another possibility, and the allergen area is still missing the RAOScan, but as I said, we're working on it. Right, and anybody, coming back to what I said before, anybody having a RAOScan and this module here, thanks to the development, it will allow to use this individual RAOScan because our updates will be for free. So it's a good idea and also a good investment. A future investment, definitely. Yes, it's a nice way of finishing this second webinar of this series, the webinars within Intolerances and Allergies. We hope that you had fun. For me, it was really beautiful to go through the past of intolerances and allergens, how everything came up, and we look forward for the next webinar, which will take place on the 2nd of March 2022, like today at 7 p.m. Yes, so I just want to reveal you a secret. I think we're going to fish and chip shop and see, look at it and dream of RAH shown there. Yes, we have all possibilities of desensitization, so we can level that out. I think that's a very nice way of finishing. So have a nice evening and see you. Bye.